Night falls early on autumn evenings in Boston. Golden leaves danced in the streets of Beacon Hill, where magnificent mansions stand side by side, painting the twilight city in amber hues. In one corner of this upscale neighborhood towered the stately Welford family mansion. Melissa White parked her car in front of the house and took a deep breath. This home held memories of her childhood, yet now she felt like a visitor. She couldn't help feeling slight tension whenever she visited her family home. "Better not be late," Melissa murmured, checking her watch. For her father Howard, punctuality was one of the most important elements reflecting one's character. As she opened the front door, James the butler greeted her as always, a faint smile on his face. Melissa was the only family member who never failed to thank the staff. "Welcome home, Miss Melissa. Everyone has already gathered in the living room." "Thank you, James," Melissa replied with a smile. "Last to arrive again, aren't I?" From the living room, she could hear her sister Victoria's confident voice, likely discussing her latest business accomplishments. Melissa took a deep breath and entered the room. "Well, Melissa, you've finally arrived." Her mother Eleanor's voice contained more criticism than affection. Her posture was perfect, her twin set and pearl necklace exuding the dignity of a queen of society. "Sorry, Mother. I was held up at the kindergarten," Melissa answered quietly. "That job of yours again," Victoria sniffed. "What's the point of looking after children anyway?" Victoria was dressed in a perfect business suit, confidence and authority emanating from her every pore. As vice president of her father's company, Welford Furniture, she effectively ran the business. Her beautiful appearance and sharp mind enhanced her reputation in the business world, but her attitude toward her sister was always cold. "It's meaningful work, Vicky," Melissa replied gently. "At least to me. Are you two starting again?" From the armchair at the far end of the living room came their father Howard's deep voice. His presence was overwhelming. His salt and pepper hair was strictly styled, and his eyes held a sharp light. As the founder of a furniture manufacturing company, he embodied its dignity. "Melissa, why are you late every time? Didn't I teach you the importance of punctuality as a Welford?" "I'm sorry, Father," Melissa said. "I'll be more careful next time." Howard nodded and raised his brandy glass. "Today is a special day. We've announced our new luxury line. Thanks to Victoria, our reputation will rise even further." "Actually, Father," Victoria said proudly, "Forbes wants to interview us. The theme is, the fusion of tradition and innovation." "Wonderful." Eleanor clapped her hands. "I can talk to Laura Hamilton at Jonathan Carter's party. She's always boasting about her husband's company." Melissa listened silently. While this family valued appearances and prestige above all else in public, she knew the company's performance had been struggling lately. Their insistence on luxury products had prevented them from adapting to market changes. But no one had the courage to mention it. "Melissa, isn't your husband joining us today?" Eleanor asked, her tone carrying a hint of sarcasm. "Ethan has a meeting with a client today," Melissa answered. "He'll be here for the family dinner tomorrow." "Ah, that consultant," Howard said dismissively. "Is he still driving that old car?" Melissa smiled. "Yes, he finds value in other things." "Which means he has no money," Victoria laughed. "Between his cheap watch and second-hand clothes, you've made quite a unique choice, haven't you?" Melissa didn't argue with her sister's words. Ethan Gray, whom she'd met at a local education charity event 3 years ago, had changed her life. His preference for simple living and his values, which prioritized richness of heart over material luxury, resonated deeply with Melissa. And she had married him despite her family's opposition. "But we have a special announcement tomorrow," Melissa changed the subject. "Special news for Ethan and me." "What? Has that man found a respectable job?" Victoria asked sarcastically. "You'll have to wait until tomorrow," Melissa replied with a smile. As she was leaving, Melissa paused outside her father's study. She could hear her father and sister talking inside. "What about the contact from the bank?" Howard's voice sounded tired. "They're still holding their decision. But don't worry. If we maintain our luxury line, we're bound to succeed. Melissa quietly walked away. There was something her family didn't know. She had recently discovered she was pregnant. And she hoped this news might improve her relationship with her family. That night, back in her apartment, Melissa called Ethan. "Are you sure about the dinner tomorrow?" Ethan's voice was tinged with concern. "Yes, it'll be fine," Melissa answered, placing her hand on her abdomen. "They're my family. They're sure to be happy about the baby news." After hanging up, Melissa stood by the window, gazing at Boston's night skyline. While pondering her complicated relationship with her family, she held on to her expectations for tomorrow. The Welford family's annual dinner was a tradition, also a special day celebrating Howard's birthday. Melissa and Ethan had arrived 10 minutes early. Nervous? Ethan held Melissa's hand. His brown eyes reflected kindness and concern. "A little," Melissa nodded. "But today is special. It'll work out fine." The dining room was bathed in the light of an elegant chandelier, with family heirloom silver settings arranged on the table. Every year, Eleanor paid meticulous attention to this setting, demanding perfection. "Melissa, Ethan, good morning." Her parents emerged from the living room. Howard was dressed in a custom-made luxury suit. "Happy birthday, Father," Melissa kissed him on the cheek. "This is for you." She handed him a small package. Inside was an old photo of the park Melissa and her father had visited in her childhood, restored and framed. "Thank you," Howard said curtly, taking the package. His attention had already shifted to Ethan's old watch. "Still wearing that watch? Any executive in my company would wear something better." Ethan smiled. "This watch is an heirloom from my grandfather. I believe its value lies in memories, not its price." "How sentimental," Victoria's voice came from the entrance. She was dressed in a cocktail dress, a new diamond necklace gleaming at her throat. "I arrived in my new Porsche. Did you see it?" "The red one," she said to Melissa. "That's the mark of success." As dinner began, conversation was filled, as usual, with talk about Welford furniture and society gossip. Eleanor recounted events from last week's charity gala in detail, while Victoria proudly discussed her recent business successes. "Next quarter, sales are projected to increase by 20%, she said to her father. "Thanks to my new luxury line, the Elegance Collection." Howard nodded with satisfaction, but Melissa could see fatigue and anxiety in his eyes. As the meal progressed, Melissa was calculating the timing for her announcement. When dessert was served, she took Ethan's hand and gathered her courage to speak. "Everyone, Ethan and I have a special announcement." Conversation around the table stopped, and all eyes turned to Melissa. "We're having a baby," Melissa smiled happily. "I'm just entering my 3rd month." "Father, you're going to be a grandfather for the first time." A moment of silence dominated the dining room. Melissa had expected to see joyful expressions from her family, but what she saw was a dark cloud spreading across her father's face. "Now." Howard's voice was cold. "At a time like this? That man's child." Melissa felt her heart freeze. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," Howard stood up. "The company is at a crossroads. Our social standing, reputation, everything is at stake." "I'm not talking about the company," Melissa said, her voice trembling. "I'm talking about our family. Your first grandchild. A child with that upstart, part of our family?" Victoria scoffed. "I'm busy saving the company right now. I don't have time to babysit." Eleanor placed a hand on her chest, her expression grave. "A child with that man? What will I tell our acquaintances?" Martha Hamilton was boasting that her grandchild got into an elite university. Melissa was stunned. This was her family's reaction. Not joy or blessing, but criticism and rejection. "This child is your grandchild. Family who shares your blood." "Welford blood mixed with that man's," Howard said coldly. Ethan quietly stood up and placed a hand on Melissa's shoulder. "Melissa just wanted to share happy news. Why are you treating her this way?" Shut up, Howard said, his voice filled with anger. I can't imagine someone as poor as you raising my grandchild. Can you imagine what environment they'll grow up in? What will happen to our social standing? Father, please, Melissa said, holding back tears. I know about the company's difficulties. Maybe Ethan could help. Difficulties? Howard's face flushed. Who said that? I have ears, Melissa answered quietly. I know the bank refused your loan, that the new line isn't selling as well as expected. I know everything. A spy. Victoria said angrily. Did you tell that man about our family problems? Ethan is a business consultant. He might be able to help. We don't need charity, Howard slammed the table. The Welfords have overcome difficulties on their own for generations. We don't need your husband. Melissa squeezed Ethan's hand tightly. Her heart was filled with shattering pain. We're leaving, Ethan said quietly. Stress isn't good for Melissa and the baby. Running away? Victoria sneered. Typical for a poor man. Eleanor remained silent, simply staring at a stain on the tablecloth. Her silence was the most painful rejection for Melissa. Let's go home, Ethan whispered in Melissa's ear. As they stood up, Howard threw his final words. This is the path you chose, Melissa. That man, that child, and a poor life. Don't regret it. Melissa turned and looked at her family. True wealth isn't in bank balances or social status. It's in love and compassion. Perhaps you're the ones who are poor if you can't understand that. Outside, stars shone in the night sky. Ethan quietly opened the car door and guided Melissa to the passenger seat. Are you okay? He asked gently. Melissa nodded, but tears streamed down her cheeks. I thought they would change. Because of the baby. Ethan held her hand. Time might resolve things. For now, let's focus on our family, this little life. A week passed. From the window of Melissa's apartment, the rainy Boston streets were visible. The gray sky seemed to reflect her heart. Are you really going? Ethan asked worriedly. He was watching his wife while making coffee in the kitchen. Mom called. Melissa moved away from the window and sat on the sofa. She wants to talk. Maybe they've reconsidered. Ethan silently placed the coffee cup down and sat beside Melissa. It's wonderful to have hope, but perhaps you shouldn't expect too much. I know, Melissa held his hand. But they're my family. This child has grandparents and an aunt. I don't want to give up. Ethan sighed deeply and kissed his wife's cheek gently. Your kindness is wonderful. But if anything happens, call me right away. I'll come get you. Melissa smiled. His words always carried a warmth that sought to protect her. An hour later, Melissa stood in front of the Welford mansion. Looking up at the garden where she had played as a child and the rooms where she'd read books by the window, nostalgia enveloped her. But today there was a different sensation. A tension like visiting a stranger's house. The front door was opened not by James the butler as usual, but by Eleanor. Her expression was cold, with no trace of the warmth once in her eyes. Come in, Eleanor said shortly, leading her daughter. In the living room, Howard stood by the window, looking outside. Victoria sat on the sofa, checking something on her tablet. When Melissa entered, all three looked at her simultaneously. Their gazes were cold as ice. Melissa, Howard spoke up. Sit down. A heavy silence hung in the room. Melissa folded her trembling hands on her lap, waiting for someone to speak. I've thought carefully, Howard finally said. His voice lacked emotion. Your pregnancy damages our family's reputation. I cannot accept a child with that man. Melissa felt a shock as if her heart had stopped. Father, what are you saying? This child is your grandchild. The Welford family has social responsibilities, Eleanor interjected. For generations, we've been part of this city's elite. That man's child would taint our bloodline. Mother. Melissa exclaimed in disbelief. How can you talk about a child that way? Face reality, Victoria said coldly. The Welford reputation is something I'm trying to save right now. Thanks to you and that fetus, everything might be ruined. Melissa stood up. Her body was shaking with anger and sadness. This child is a Welford, a being deserving of love. Ethan will make a wonderful father. His background and wealth don't matter. Don't matter. Howard suddenly exploded. Everything matters. Name, family background, wealth, social status. Without them, a person is nothing. That's not true, Father, Melissa said quietly but firmly. Love and compassion define a person. Love? Howard sneered. It's because you believe in such illusions that you always fail. I haven't failed, Melissa stiffened. I have a happy marriage, meaningful work, and a child on the way. Is that failure? The atmosphere in the room changed. Howard's face twisted with anger, and he was about to say something when Victoria stood up and grabbed her father's arm. Tell her, Father, her voice contained cruel joy. Tell her what we've decided. Howard fixed his gaze on Melissa and opened his mouth. I don't want to see your child. Get out now. Melissa was speechless. What? Didn't you hear? Howard started walking toward the hallway. You are no longer a daughter of this house. I don't recognize you or that man's child. Melissa followed her father. Father, you can't be serious? I am your daughter. In the corner of the hallway, Melissa's old bag had been placed. It contained childhood mementos of photos, diaries, a small doll. Howard picked it up and headed for the entrance. This is your luggage. The rest has been discarded. Saying this, he threw the bag onto the doorstep, as if disposing of trash. Father. Melissa cried. Why are you doing this? Don't make me say it, Howard said quietly, but with terrible hatred. Someone like you has no right to bear our family name. Melissa looked at her mother. Eleanor lowered her eyes, remaining silent. That silence more eloquently than 1,000 words told of her mother's choice. Mother. Melissa's voice trembled. You too. Victoria chuckled and stood in Melissa's way. A child from a failure like you is just garbage. Malice dwelled in her eyes. Always second best, always insignificant. Whatever you produce has no value. Hot tears streamed down Melissa's cheeks. In disbelief, she stared at her family. We're family, why? Family. Howard sneered. You betrayed the family when you chose that man. Melissa placed her hand on her abdomen, standing as if to protect the life within. I only chose someone I love. Is that betrayal? Get out now, Howard declared. Don't ever show your face again. Melissa staggered toward the entrance and picked up her bag. Turning back in tears, she said finally, the day will come when you'll regret this. All of you. She got into her car and inserted the key with tear-blurred eyes. Her hands shook, making it difficult to start the engine. At that moment, a small voice whispered within her, with all this, you still don't really know whose child I'm carrying. For a moment, she considered leaving Ethan's business card on Howard's desk. He wasn't just a consultant but a successful investor and owner of multiple companies. But Melissa discarded the idea. They weren't worth knowing the truth. They couldn't judge with their hearts. As she pulled the car onto the street, her phone rang. It was Ethan. How did it go? His voice was warm and full of concern. Melissa laughed through her tears. It was terrible. It's not my home anymore. I've been thrown out. Come home right now, Ethan's voice was strong and unwavering. I'm waiting for you and the baby. Your real family. With those words, Melissa realized for the first time what true family meant. Not blood ties, but love and acceptance. It was right in front of her. Thank you, she whispered. I'll be right home. The car drove through the twilight city, and Melissa quietly vowed in her heart. Through this pain, she would teach her child the meaning of true family. And she would never become the kind of adult her parents were. 3 months after her banishment, on a winter morning, Melissa woke up in a modest but warm home in the Boston suburbs. Outside the window, snow was falling quietly, coloring the garden trees white. She slowly sat up and placed her hand on her swollen belly. "Good morning, little one," she whispered with a smile. From the next room came Ethan's voice. He was talking to someone on the phone. Business talk, Melissa thought. She had noticed her husband getting up earlier than usual to work. Heading to the kitchen, she found breakfast and a note Ethan had prepared on the counter. "In my office. I'll join you for breakfast after my meeting. With love." Melissa smiled and looked toward her husband's office while making coffee. The door was closed, but quiet conversation could be heard from inside. She turned on the TV and tuned into the morning news. In business news this morning, Boston's long-established furniture maker, Welford Furniture, has been officially sold. The buyer is a mysterious investment group, Gray Investment. The company has indicated plans to revitalize the management system while maintaining the corporate name. Melissa nearly dropped her coffee cup in surprise. Welford Furniture had been sold? How were her father and sister doing? The company had been their entire lives. Just then, her phone rang. Looking at the screen, she saw Victoria's name displayed. Melissa hesitated. The wounds from 3 months ago hadn't yet healed. But perhaps something important had happened. She took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Melissa," Victoria's voice had lost its former arrogance. "Do you have time to talk?" "What is it?" Melissa's voice was cold. "I want to talk in person," Victoria said, almost pleadingly. "Please. It's important." "Why should I meet with you?" Melissa asked quietly. "You called me a failure and my child garbage. Remember?" On the other end of the phone, Victoria could be heard drawing a sharp breath. "Melissa, I'm truly sorry. I was confused then. My head was full of company matters." "Is that your reason for apologizing?" "No," Victoria answered quickly. "It's no excuse. Just, did you know the company was sold?" "I just saw it on the news. I want to meet the new owners. I want to know who they are." Victoria's voice was filled with urgency. "I want to meet your husband." Melissa frowned. "Ethan? Why? He's a business consultant, right? He might know through his connections how to meet the founder of Gray Investment." Melissa was silent. Something was odd. Victoria suddenly wanting to meet Ethan. "Please, Melissa," Victoria's voice had now completely turned to pleading. "The company has been saved. But our positions are unstable. If we could meet the new owner, father's and my positions might be guaranteed." "Where shall we meet?" Melissa finally asked. "How about lunch at Louise's?" "At noon." When Melissa hung up, Ethan emerged from his office. Seeing his wife's expression, he immediately realized something had happened. "What's wrong?" he asked worriedly. Melissa explained the phone conversation. Ethan listened quietly, wearing a thoughtful expression. "Why not meet her?" he said gently. "Your sister might have her reasons. But that day. It doesn't mean forgiveness." Ethan took her hand. "Just that listening is important, I think." There was a light in his eyes suggesting he was planning something. Melissa noticed but didn't ask for details. At noon, Melissa was waiting for her sister at Louise's restaurant. Victoria appeared without her usual haughty attitude, obviously tense. "Thank you for coming," she said as she sat down. "Honestly, I thought you would refuse." "What did you want to talk about?" Melissa asked directly. "First, let me apologize," Victoria said with a serious expression. "Everything I said and did that day was wrong. My vision was clouded by pride and fear." Melissa silently stared at her sister. She had never seen Victoria so humble. "The company has been acquired," Victoria continued, "by a company called Gray Investment. They offered surprisingly generous terms. They promised to cancel all of Father's debts and protect the brand name and employees." "That's good, isn't it?" But the problem is that we can't meet the company's founder. Victoria lowered her voice. No one knows who he is. Father's and my positions are in limbo. So you want to meet Ethan? I thought he might have connections, Victoria said, almost begging. Please, Melissa. Let me meet your husband. As Melissa was about to answer, her phone rang. It was a message from Ethan. Come to the Boston Ritz penthouse. Bring your sister. Melissa couldn't hide her surprise. Ethan at the Boston Ritz penthouse? What is it? Victoria asked. A message from Ethan, Melissa said. If you want to meet him, let's go together. Victoria looked confused but nodded. Getting into a taxi, they headed for the Ritz. While riding the elevator to the penthouse, Melissa's heart was beating rapidly. What was happening? When the door opened, Ethan stood there in an expensive suit. It was a perfectly fitted custom suit, unimaginable from his usual modest clothing. The room was luxurious, with a panoramic view of Boston through the windows. And on the sofa sat Howard and Eleanor with puzzled expressions. Welcome, Ethan smiled. We've been waiting for you. Melissa stared at her husband, noticing the quiet determination in his eyes. And everything connected. It's you, she whispered. Gray Investments. Ethan nodded. I am the CEO of Gray Investment. I started a technology company at 15 and sold it at 28. With those funds, I established a foundation to support children around the world. The room fell silent. Stunned expressions appeared on all the Welfords' faces. Those who couldn't see Melissa's true value have no right to run the company. Ethan's voice was quiet but had unwavering strength. However, because Melissa said, they're still family, I saved the company. Howard raised his face, confronting for the first time the true identity of the consultant who had deceived him. The proud Welford's expression showed fear and defeat. You deceived me. Howard stood in the center of the penthouse, directing his anger at Ethan. His face was red with anger and humiliation. Not at all, Ethan responded calmly. I simply didn't reveal my background. Think about it. If you had known about my wealth from the beginning, would you have considered Melissa's true happiness? Or would you have just focused on my assets? Howard was at a loss for words. Eleanor rose tearfully and tried to approach Melissa. Let me see my grandchild, she pleaded. I'm truly sorry about that day. I did something unforgivable. Victoria also stood before Melissa and bowed her head. Please give me another chance. Let me start over as your sister. Melissa was silent, wrapped in complex emotions. Anger, sadness, and love for this family were mixed, tearing at her heart. Ethan stood by her side and held her hand. The decision is Melissa's, his voice was gentle, full of respect for his wife. Melissa took a deep breath and looked at her family. True family finds your value and loves you unconditionally. It's a bond formed by hearts, not money or status. She placed her hand on her abdomen, standing as if to protect the baby that was coming. I can't forgive immediately, but this child has the right to know their grandparents and aunt. Over time, we might be able to build a new relationship. But that requires honesty and respect. Howard looked at his daughter for the first time with eyes that seemed to recognize her strength. 5 years later, laughter echoed in a garden in the Boston suburbs. 4-year-old Emma was planting flowers with Howard. The once arrogant man now had a gentle expression as he taught his granddaughter how to handle soil. Grandpa, what color will this flower be? Purple, Emma, Howard smiled. Your mother's favorite color. Howard now humbly offered advice as an honorary advisor to Welford Furniture, which had been rebuilt as an employee-owned company. His arrogance had disappeared, replaced by a passion for charitable activities. On the terrace, Eleanor was having tea with Melissa while holding her newborn grandson. She was ashamed of her former life of pretense and now valued time with her grandchildren above all else. In the backyard, Victoria was showing Ethan new designs for her own furniture line brand. She had learned humility and was achieving success with her own talent. Melissa and Ethan continued to live a modest but love-filled life. They co-managed a huge foundation, providing educational opportunities to children worldwide. At the Christmas dinner table, where the entire Welford family gathered, Emma innocently asked, "Mommy, what's a real family?" Melissa hugged her daughter and, looking around at everyone in the room, answered, "Not money or blood ties. Respecting each other, supporting one another in hard times, and above all, loving each other. That's a real family." Ethan's eyes met his wife's, exchanging quiet understanding and deep love. Outside the window, snow began to fall quietly, announcing the arrival of a new season.